It all seems a little bit scattergun from Manchester United, if I'm being honest.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Man United tax on that as well?
yeah, there probably is a Man United tax.
So 86 million is Sesko's release clause.
And I know it sounds crazy to say a 50, 60 million pound player is a stopgap.
Villa are publicly insisting he's not for sale, but
I think if you're a Man United fan, you don't want to be hearing that.
hello and welcome to Transfers Exposed. I am the Sun's Will Pugh, and alongside me, replacing Dean Scoggins, who's sunning himself on the beaches of Turkey, is football broadcaster Harry Symeou. Harry Symeou, wonderful to see you, mate.
Thanks for having me. Pleased to be here. And this is your exclusive press pass to the hottest transfer stories straight from the SunSport newsroom.
Absolutely that, mate. We are here, of course, every Tuesday and Thursday. Harry, an able deputy for Dean Scoggins, I am sure. We go from a Tottenham fan, now we've got an Arsenal one. Make sure you're with us, though, every Tuesday and Thursday as the transfer window develops until it slams shut on September the 1st.
Yeah, as I say, really glad to be here. And in this video, we're going to break down all the latest from Manchester United. And just glancing at the running order, I can see lots of names. Ollie, Watkins, Donnarumma, Martinez, Nicolas Jackson. So many names to get into.
Yeah, Benjamin Sesko, of course. Harry, who your beloved Arsenal were tracking for quite some time this summer before they went with Gyökeres. But Martin Lipton, our number one man for all things United this summer, is out in Chicago at the moment following the Reds on their pre-season tour. Absolutely despicable performance from West Ham. Handed United a 2-1 win in that summer series in New York over the weekend. New Jersey, I think it actually was. Look, we'll start the two main stories, Harry, right? We've got Ollie Watkins being United's number one striker target, right? They're also looking at Sesko as well. Brilliant piece from Martin. Head to thesun.co.uk/sport. That is leading the football page at the moment if you want to give it a read. But that's what we're going to cover first. Also, the goalkeeper situation. Andre Onana, the position for quite a long time in the summer out of United seems to be, if we can get a replacement, happy days. That stance seems to have shifted somewhat now. There was talks of them being interested in Donnarumma, who's in a contract standoff with PSG at the moment with just 1 year left on his deal. And Martinez, who did that, formerly of your parish, of course, who did that weird emotional goodbye at the end of last season when there had been not huge, or certainly hadn't been confirmation that he was leaving. That's what we're going to cover in this video. We'll start with Ollie Watkins. So Martin reporting that the Watkins-Sesko are they're the duo that United are targeting now, right? Which rules out any interest in Nicolas Jackson, who we reported, I think, 11 days ago now on Transfers Exposed, that Jackson was open to the move. But Chelsea initially wanted 100 million for him. That was then reduced to 80 when everyone in the market was like, are you kidding? 100 million for Jackson? I don't think so. Contact has been made with the entourages from United of Sesko and Watkins. And basically, they're just keeping both options open at this stage in case any one of those negotiations becomes problematic. They obviously we all know that they've got that bomb squad. They want to get rid of players, but Rasmus Højlund as well, they're also keen to move him on, despite him coming out and saying, I expect to be a Manchester United player next season. Now, what do you make of this? We'll go into in a little while sort of who you prefer. But what do you make of it all?
Yeah, I mean, it all seems a little bit scattergun from Manchester United, if I'm being honest.
Absolutely.
I mean, going into the season, we know that they need to improve dramatically. Their league finish was unacceptable last season, and obviously losing in the Europa League final the way they did, that's got to hurt. And I think there are some people out there that are questioning the Ruben Amorim project. Did they see enough in that short window he's been in charge to suggest that United are moving in the right direction? What I find fascinating about this window for United is that they've seemed to have shifted their approach. And it seems like with the signings they've already made, Cunha and Bumo, they're looking for Premier League proven people. Yeah. People that can come in and help them straight away. But in my opinion, they're paying somewhat over the top for those players because of that Premier League experience.
I think there's a Man United tax on that as well?
Yeah, there probably is a Man United tax. But Man United, for me, are in this position because they have repeatedly overspent. And I think, you look at Watkins and you look at Sesko, and one's a Premier League proven player who's not got a great deal of time left on his contract. You're going to have to overpay because of that Premier League and Man United tax, as you say. But then Sesko is not a Premier League proven player and someone that you'd be signing, I think, more so for potential,
Yeah.
but is also going to cost a hell of a lot of money.
Well,
so it's really hard, I think, if you're Man United now, to know exactly which route to go down.
Yeah, so 86 million is Šeško's release clause at RB Leipzig. Obviously, now Arsenal have got Gyökeres. Leipzig's position somewhat weaker in they couldn't play those big teams off against each other. You've said it already. Arsenal, Sesko was their priority earlier in the window. What did you just make of that quickly? Because it seemed to you were a bit sort of disappointed that he didn't kind of come at it with the same energy Gyökeres did.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Gyökeres signing seems like it was pushed by Andrea Berta, Arsenal's new sporting director.
Yeah.
That's where the change in direction, I think, stems from. But I think throughout the window, you kind of expected Benjamin Sesko to push a little bit for this Premier League move, and he never did. At no point was he and his agent, as far as we're aware, willing to kind of drop their demands a little bit. RB Leipzig's demands, for me, are crazy. And I think the combination of those two things has done him out of a move. Will he end up at Manchester United? At this stage? At this stage, yeah. But will he go to Man United? He could do. But if he does, then Man United, in my opinion, are going to be overpaying because, as I said already, this is a signing that would be based on what you think he can become and not necessarily what he is today.
Well, look, for the United fans thinking, why is he talking about Arsenal? Harry is a huge Arsenal fan, of course. But this caveat, right, comes on the end of all Manchester United transfer stories this summer. Any players they're linked with, they have to move some players on first. We all know the bomb squad are. They've got rid of Rashford to Barcelona, of course, not the greatest of starts in that friendly the other day for Rashford. But Garnacho, they want to get rid of. They want to get rid of Malacia. They want to get rid of Sancho. They want to get rid of Antony. They also want to get rid of Rasmus Højlund, ideally on a permanent deal, but a loan would be acceptable to them. Aston Villa, by the way, have dismissed all suggestions of an Ollie Watkins approach. It's like, well, yeah, they've dismissed suggestions of an Ollie Watkins club-to-club approach, but as we see in this day and age, almost all transfer dealings get done with the players' camp first. Now, Villa are publicly insisting he's not for sale, but they obviously did offer him to Arsenal in January for 60 million quid before they were able to get rid of John Duran. Arsenal didn't want to go to the 60 million mark. Duran went to Al Nassr instead. Now, what I think you can read more into from Aston Villa's stance this window is their position on Morgan Rogers. Now, Chelsea made it quite clear, or it was reported, I think we reported that on Transfers Exposed in the Sun, that Chelsea had made Rogers their number one target. Villa valued him at around 80 million quid, probably a little bit lower than some people might have thought, but that was given their precarious PSR situation. But they were absolutely certain, Aston Villa, they made no qualms about it whatsoever. Morgan Rogers is not going anywhere. And the sense out of the club was, we'd rather sell two players than one. Now, Jacob Ramsey and Ollie Watkins' names have been mentioned around that. That is certainly not Villa's stance whatsoever, or their public stance. That tends to be the sense. But for Watkins, it feels like that would be a superb deal for player and club. Where do you sit with it?
Yeah, I mean, Ollie Watkins has done it in the Premier League for a number of seasons now. We know that he's capable. We know that he's someone that a lot of managers would like to have. He can run channels. He can drop slightly deeper. He can be the kind of box player that you want him to be and you want your centre forward to be. I think, though, Villa's stance on Watkins is quite strong. You know, they say he's not for sale. They're probably going to try and get as close to that £60 million as possible. I think they'd actually deal at less. I think Villa's situation around PSR is problematic. I think the fact that they missed out on Champions League qualification last year was a big blow to them in terms of taking that next step and progressing as a football club. But you look at Watkins' age and you look at the contract length and you can't, justify, I don't think, if you're Man United or anybody else that's interested in him, going to the £60 million mark. So
no, totally.
I think this is one that you're going to have to wait and see how it develops. But I'd imagine a deal will be done, taking Ollie Watkins somewhere towards the back end of the window, and for far less than 60 million. 29
years of age, 3 years left on his deal. The sense at the moment, sort of the whisperings we're getting on SunSport is that if there was 50 million quid on the table, if there was 55 million on the table, they take it tomorrow. If there's 50 million quid on the table, the more the window goes on. And Villa fans have been in the comments recently screaming at us saying, oh, their PSR position's not as bad as you say it is. And it has improved for sure, but they still could, if they're going to bring any more players in, they still could do with getting some off the books. And I don't think Yeah, I think if the money was right, they wouldn't be worried about
Yeah.
getting rid of Watkins at all. Given at the end of last season, particularly with the Champions League against PSG as the most sort of publicised bit, there was sort of a low-key sense, as absolutely unbelievable as he's been for Villa, that he might not necessarily be Unai Emery's top choice anymore. But just on this, on the Sesko side of things, right? Your beloved Arsenal have been linked with both of these players heavily. Obviously, the January move fell through, and Sesko, who we can see here as well, you were heavily linked with him earlier in the summer, as we've suggested. Who would you have rather? I know the Watkins links weren't really there this window, but as an Arsenal fan, ignore the Gyökeres deal for a minute. Who would you have rather? What do you think of them as players?
For me, it was totally dependent on the prices. You know, I went into the summer knowing full well that Arsenal had multiple positions that they needed to address. They needed to completely rebuild the midfield because they'd lost Jorginho and Thomas Partey. So for that reason, I was open to the idea of spending less and getting Ollie Watkins, someone that would come in and probably score a similar volume of goals to Benjamin Sesko. I understand that he probably doesn't have that room to grow and develop, but if you're paying half the price, then at that time, that might have been the right thing for Arsenal. And I think if you're Man United as well, like in this situation, right, you either go all in on Benjamin Sesko and back him to be the long-term solution, but they've done that with the likes of Rasmus Højlund, and that hasn't worked. Maybe they've been burnt a little bit by that. Or you buy the stopgap. And I know it sounds crazy to say a 50, 60 million pound player is a stopgap, but that's the market we're in these days. And if you then end up with Watkins and Mbeumo and obviously Cunha, and those guys are going to help you get back to that level where you're competing for Europe again and back in those places, then maybe you do that and go again. I'm not entirely sure. Personally, if I was United with all the positions that they need addressing, I would probably go for Watkins.
I couldn't agree more. I just feel, you've mentioned Premier League experience here, right? That's exactly what United have been going for. I'm still baffled about their sort of seeming inability to improve their defence as well. It feels like, we're going to buy all these forward players and sort of hope it all comes good. As far as Sesko and Watkins go, sort of different profile players, to be fair. He's sort of like a hulking 6 foot plus centre forward. Not that Ollie Watkins is not that he's a sort of pocket sized centre forward, of course, but I feel exactly the same thing. And when you're talking 85 million quid for Sesko, Gyökeres, to be fair, I know Arsenal fans are very excited about it, hasn't played in the Premier League. And I think there is something in that, isn't there? In that, if you've played in the Prem before, there is value in that. And there is an element of risk. No matter how well these players have performed in other leagues, Højlund's a great example of that. There's no guarantees, is there?
No, I think any signing that you make, when you're talking about the amounts of money that we talk about today, carries an element of risk to it. There's no question about that. And Sesko carries risk, Gyökeres carries risk. But I think with Victor Gyökeres, the difference was that this is a guy that you feel right now is kind of at the peak of his powers and is ready to come in with confidence and a belief. Whereas Benjamin Sesko, he didn't make the move to the Premier League last year, largely because he didn't feel that he was ready. Now, if that was only 12 months ago, and he hasn't had the most inspiring season last season, 13 Bundesliga goals, was playing as part of a front two at RB Leipzig as well, which is a very different role to what he'd be required to play at any of the Premier League clubs that are said to be interested. So for me, I think, Benjamin Sesko represents the bigger risk, the biggest risk of them all, has the biggest
just because of the money as well.
Because of the money as well, for sure. It has the biggest potential upside as well, because I think he's got a lot of the attributes you need to be a top striker. But it depends what your priorities are. And if we're going back to Man United, having got Cunha in and Mbeumo in, I think the priorities have to shift to other areas of the pitch. I mean, the midfield is so out of balance. That's the key for me. Yeah,
totally agree. Well, one other area of the pitch that they appeared for in the earlier part of the window that they were going to improve is the goalkeeper position. I don't think there's many fans of other Premier League clubs up and down the country who would be delighted if Onana arrived at their club during this transfer window. Now, the sense was earlier in the window out of United that if there's an improvement to be made there, they will make it. That stance seems to have shifted somewhat. Again, Martin Lipton writing from Chicago. He's extremely close to the team on that tour, of course, and a very, very, very well-connected journalist, one of the best in his field, of course. Very proud to have Martin on board, as we are. Now, he's writing this Gianluigi, Donnarumma, in the middle of a standoff with PSG at the moment. He's got 1 year left on his deal. Obviously won them the Champions League, part of one of the greatest PSG teams of all time. He wants a pay rise, Harry, on his £210,000 a week contract. He's only 26, to be fair, which is sometimes hard to believe. But United's stance, then exactly what you're saying. They're focusing on other areas of the team. They are not interested in getting involved in a big old transfer battle for a player whose attitude has sort of been questioned at times. Obviously, he backs it up with his ability, so teams are able to overlook that somewhat. They're not willing to go there, which has sort of opened the door for Man City and Chelsea to perhaps thrash it out and capitalise if PSG can't get anywhere. They might go, look, we've got one chance to cash in on him before his contract starts dwindling down. Ederson, of course, only 1 year left on his Man City deal. He stated last month that he's not interested in leaving Man City, but as we've seen with the Kevin De Bruyne departure, City are ready, as they always have been, to make ruthless decisions. Legend as Ederson is, just a year left on his deal. Another one where if they want to cash in, now would be the time to do it. And Martin also writing that United have shelved their interest in Emi Martinez, which was one that surprised me, to be fair, because it seemed like in the background that one was chugging along. They made an offer to Aston Villa to loan Martinez last week, but that was rejected. United not willing to go any further in that deal. So now the position is that Andre Onana is our number one for the season. Lots to pack in there. What do you make of all of it? What's the most alarming, interesting, concerning for you?
I think if you're a Man United fan, you don't want to be hearing that Andre Onana's still part of the plan. With all due respect to Andre Onana, and he had a great time before he came to United at Inter especially, where I was really impressed with him. I'm a big follower of the Serie A, but at the end of the day, he just hasn't done it in a Manchester United shirt. He's been culpable for so many goals in big moments in key games, and I think it's time that Man United move past him. He is very much indicative of the Erik ten Hag era, which was a poor one at Manchester United, despite the trophies, despite the silverware. I think with the goalkeeping situation for United, it's one that they clearly need to address. But, it feels to me like they don't really want to spend too much money there. Because if you're talking about Martinez and a loan deal, that's not going to appeal to Aston Villa. Aston Villa would like to get something in and get him out the door because they are a club that are hamstrung by the PSR rules at the moment. Would saving on his wages help them? I'm sure it would. But I think
he's one of their top earners.
Yeah, for sure. But they'd want to get something in the door. And then you look at Donnarumma and it feels like, we've just heard that Man United are not interested. I think the only reason they've been linked is because Donnarumma's going into the final year of his contract and because of this standoff. But that one feels to me like it's agent-driven. I think Donnarumma stays at PSG. I'd be surprised if he moved on this summer. I think he will get his pay rise eventually because at the moment his stock's very high.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's one of those things. If PSG realise or think, well, no one else is going to pay you that, so we're not going to. The only reason you'd think they'd extend him is to protect his value beyond this summer window, which clubs are obviously very concerned about that in this day and age. But just quickly then, if you're City or Chelsea, I would say far more in need of a goalkeeper, obviously dependent if Ederson goes. James Trafford's come in at City, but the feeling among the club is a little bit soon to make him the number one. So if Ederson was to go, they would need to bring someone in. Where do you think how do you see all the cards falling, I suppose?
For Chelsea, I agree with you. They definitely need a goalkeeper. They need to bring someone in.
They wouldn't pay Donnarumma's wages, though. That breaks their wage structure.
I don't think they'd pay Donnarumma's wages, and I don't think they'd see Donnarumma as the ideal fit. He's a great goalkeeper. I saw it firsthand in the semi-finals of the Champions League, capable of making match-winning saves at any point. Does he fit into the style that a lot of these top coaches like to implement at the moment in terms of playing with his feet? I don't think he does. I think that's the one thing that Donnarumma lacks. That and maybe his concentration at times, it can go.
And if you're paying 210 grand a week, you want a bit of
and listen, Enzo Maresca, with all due respect to him, I wasn't sure when Chelsea appointed him, but he knows what he wants. He's very specific in what he wants. He was very quick to isolate certain players and say, they're not part of my plans. Yeah. And I don't think in his Chelsea vision, there's room for a goalkeeper like Donnarumma. So I don't see him joining any of the Premier League clubs, to be honest.